it's not good for me to see pictures of myself every day because I have a tendency, and it's only happened.
Hi guys, so did you know that Taylor Swift's former manager...
I'm not trying to be a prude here, but if I'm the mom of the 10-year-old girl in the audience, there were just a couple of moves there that I would be like, you're right.
Dan Dimtro?
In the past, I've been reluctant to publicly voice my political opinions, but due to several events in my life and in the world in the past 2 years, I feel very differently about that now. I always have and always will cast my vote based on which candidate will protect and fight for the human rights I believe we all deserve in this country.
Scott attempted to dissuade his daughter from posting the statement.
Actually sued Taylor and her
I've read the entire thing, and the bottom line right now, I'm terrified. I'm the guy that went out and bought armored cars.
family over claims he was never properly compensated during the early years of her career. That lawsuit cracked open a vault of secrets, including a shocking leaked email from Taylor ES father Scott Swift, spelling out in detail the financial moves and behind-the-scenes planning that went into building Taylor into a global superstar. This email doesn't just show numbers. It pulls back the curtain on just how calculated celebrity careers can be. And when it comes to Taylor, it's even more shocking, because she's famously guarded about her personal life. The version of Taylor we see in her lyrics paints her as deeply relatable, a girl next door writing from the heart. But this document suggests something else entirely, that Taylor and her parents weren't just chasing dreams, they were strategically orchestrating her rise from day one. Hey everyone, welcome back to Scandalous Media. It's Alana here. Today we're exposing Taylor Swift's relationship with her parents, Scott and Andrea Swift, and the controversial role they played in her rise to the top. From the very beginning, Taylor's journey was not some organic stroke of luck. It was the result of meticulous planning, powerful industry connections, and a carefully paved path toward fame that most aspiring artists could never access. This leaked email from Scott Swift gives us an unfiltered look at the reality most fans never see: the business deals, the calculated branding, and the behind-the-scenes strategies that turned Taylor into a household name. It's the kind of information that was never supposed to reach the public. And yet here it is, painting a very different picture of the pop star who's often portrayed as the underdog-turned-icon. What makes this even more explosive is how it reframes Taylor's image. The same Taylor who built a career on heartbreak anthems and relatable storytelling may have been benefiting all along from connections and strategies designed to keep her 10 steps ahead of everyone else. The leaked correspondence reveals how Scott Swift worked tirelessly behind the scenes to secure opportunities, control the narrative, and essentially roll out the red carpet for his daughter before the public even knew her name. And let's be real. In Hollywood, luck doesn't get you far. Connections open doors, and money keeps them open. For Taylor, her parents weren't just supportive. They were power players, ensuring every move was perfectly calculated. So here's where it gets juicy. This wasn't just a casual email. It stretched across 5 pages, loaded with details that read more like a playbook for manufacturing stardom than a father's supportive note. And once you read it, you realize Taylor's career wasn't built on chance. It was engineered. Get ready, because in the next part, we're breaking down exactly what Scott Swift wrote in this email, and how it reveals the hidden machinery behind Taylor's carefully polished image. Now, let's get back to the real story. Taylor Swift's upbringing, the part of her life that most fans never saw. And before we go further, let me make this clear. Nothing in this video is meant to erase Taylor's talent, her hard work, or her dedication to her craft. But this leaked email from Scott Swift shines a very different light on how the music industry really works, and how much of Taylor's rise wasn't as natural as the fairy tale story suggests. Taylor grew up in comfort and privilege. Her parents, Scott and Andrea Swift, were far from average. Andrea, who once worked as a vice president at a mutual fund company, married Scott Swift, a wealthy stockbroker who later became a vice president at Merrill Lynch. They tied the knot in February of 1988 in Harris County, Texas. Not long after, Taylor was born on December 13, 1989, followed by her younger brother Austin in 1992. What's fascinating is how different this reality is from the image Taylor's team carefully crafted. She never openly branded herself as someone who came from wealth. Instead, her narrative was built on a softer, more humble image. The girl who grew up on a Christmas tree farm in Pennsylvania. That farm became a key piece of her story, a symbol of simplicity, relatability, and small-town innocence. But here's where it gets interesting. That story only tells half the truth. Yes, Taylor lived on a Christmas tree farm, but behind that was a family with deep financial resources and powerful connections. She wasn't hustling in Nashville with nothing but a guitar and a dream. Her family was already plotting her career like a corporate project. The leaked email from Scott Swift proves it wasn't just about talent. It was about strategy, access, and resources most aspiring artists could never even imagine. And this is the part that frustrates many people. Taylor E.S. brand has always leaned on relatability, the idea that she is just like us, singing about heartbreak, small-town struggles, and the awkwardness of growing up. But in reality, she had every advantage lined up before her first single ever hit the airwaves. In the next section, we'll go through how Scott Swift's 5-page email lays out those advantages, exposing just how carefully engineered Taylor's rise really was. And once you hear the details, you will never look at her small-town girl makes it big narrative the same way again. Never once did Taylor openly admit that she grew up with immense privilege, but the leaked email from her dad, Scott Swift, makes it crystal clear. And don't just take it from me, take it from Scott himself. In his message to Taylor's former manager, Dan Dimtro, Scott bragged, "Keep in mind that I manage $270 million, but more importantly, 249 families at Merrill in a terrible market. I am in the top 1% of all brokers at the most prestigious investment firm in the world." That statement alone tells you two things. First, Scott had money and influence most families could only dream of, and second, he was not shy about flaunting it. He even bragged that he was able to uproot his entire family, Andrea, Taylor, and her brother Austin, and move them to Nashville purely for Taylor's career. And here's where the email starts spiraling. Scott vents bitterly saying, "Who made enough money that if we had to take off across the country, we would be okay? Who hired staff ahead of time so that we could move to Nashville? The idiot that lives with Andrea." His words paint him as a man both self-congratulatory and resentful, frustrated at being underappreciated by his wife and daughter. The unhinged tone of the email doesn't stop there. Scott repeatedly throws shade at Andrea, Taylor's mother, while constantly reminding Dan that he was the one bankrolling and orchestrating Taylor's every career move. He even repeats the phrase, "Don't laugh, you'll be a dad someday," multiple times throughout his rant, as if demanding someone recognize the sacrifices he believed he was making. But what truly shocked fans was the way Scott leveraged his wealth and connections to get Taylor on stage. He detailed how he invited local influencer Scott Sanford out to their Nashville lake house, promising jet skis, boats, and endless hospitality, but with one catch. He told Sanford he would only corral ducks for the city's famous Nashville duck drop if Taylor was allowed to perform at the Riverfront Park event. Scott admitted, "I invite Scott Sanford out to the lake. He wants us to corral ducks. I agree, but only if Taylor sings. I take my bow, tow 2 jet skis 35 miles to Nashville, herd the ducks, and haul 15,000 little rubber bastards, all while my daughter is singing." And just like that, Taylor was booked. On the surface, fans watching her at an event like the Duck Drop might have thought she earned her spot, maybe even won a contest. In reality, her father's wealth and influence were pulling the strings, turning small local shows into stepping stones for her career. Scott admitted that he made sure everyone he knew listened to Taylor-ass music, even his wealthy clients at Merrill Lynch. He bragged in the email, "Who has made every single client listen to Taylor-ass latest song before we went over their financial plan? I did." Imagine being in a meeting about your retirement savings, only to be forced into listening to a teenager's demo before signing your papers. That was the reality for Scott Yes clients, all because he was determined to push his daughter into stardom. And while Scott framed himself as the mastermind, the bitterness bleeds through every paragraph. He couldn't stand that Andrea was the one traveling with Taylor to her shows, smiling for cameras, and enjoying the spotlight, while he was left behind doing what he called the dirty work. According to him, mom and daughter got the fun, while he got resentment. The email even included petty jabs at Andrea, mocking her for dismissing his efforts while he tirelessly copied Taylor's demo tapes, promoted her to his corporate board, and orchestrated small-town appearances. He wrote, "When Taylor was 11, her theater group had never been invited to Municipal Stadium in Reading. Who suggested Oldies Day? I did. Who offered up the cast of Grease? I did. Who promoted his 11-year-old at every board meeting until they gave her a spot? I did." It is a fascinating glimpse into how much control Scott believed he had over Taylor's destiny, and how underappreciated he felt for it. The rant reads less like a father supporting his daughter and more like a businessman demanding recognition for his investment. And this is where the cracks in the Swift family dynamic start to show. It's widely believed that Scott and Andrea quietly divorced around 2010 or 2011, though neither party has ever confirmed it. What's clear is that their obsession with controlling the family's public narrative ran deep. And this email proves just how chaotic things were behind the polished image of the all-American Christmas tree farm girl. When the scheduled singer for the national anthem didn't show up at an event, guess who they turned to? Taylor. And guess who made sure it happened? According to Scott Swift, he did. He bragged in his email, "Who videotaped it? I did. Who made copies and used old contacts to send it to the 76ers, even while everyone mocked me? I did." This became a pattern. Scott would proudly list out his behind-the-scenes contributions, reminding everyone that while Andrea and Taylor were enjoying first-class treatment in dressing rooms, he was stuck outside, driving the car, handling logistics, and recording every moment. He vented bitterly, "Whose wife thinks I talk too much and promote Taylor too much? Mine. Share my pain, please." And honestly, reading it feels like walking into the diary of a man spiraling between pride and resentment. On one hand, you can ignore his impact. His persistence and constant networking opened doors Taylor couldn't have reached alone at age 11. But on the other hand, the tone is so unhinged, it's hard not to laugh and cringe at the same time. Scott even admitted that Andrea had him on email restriction, meaning he wasn't allowed to email Taylor's team unless Andrea approved it first. He wrote sarcastically, "Welcome to my world. Send this to her or mention it to Taylor and there will probably be a quick divorce." That little smiley face at the end, it's chilling. Proof that he was half joking, half threatening, and fully desperate to be taken seriously. His obsession with being recognized is relentless. He outlined example after example, insisting that without him, Taylor wouldn't have the career milestones fans celebrate today. He bragged about sending demo tapes to the Philadelphia 76ers, pushing connections with the USTA president, and constantly forcing people in his financial network to listen to Taylor's music. Over and over, he paints himself as the man who paid for everything, filmed everything, and fought for every opportunity. And yet, he's also the guy mocked as too much, the dad who can fix his hair, and talks too much to be brought to the glamorous events. This email paints a clear picture of a family at war behind the curtain. Both Scott and Andrea were overbearing, both tried to micromanage Taylor's career, and both clashed over who got the credit. Taylor, stuck in the middle, became the project they were fighting to control. Instead of parents simply supporting a daughter's passion, you had two corporate-minded strategists treating her career like a business investment. And while Andrea was the one front and center at events with Taylor, Scott was seething in the background, convinced he was the true architect of her success. He even wrote bitterly, "Who pays for everything? Dad. Who filmed it all? Dad. Who opened the doors with connections? Dad. But who gets to go to New York, New England, and every cool appearance? Not Dad." The contradiction is stunning. Here's a father desperate for recognition, yet unable to see how his obsessive need for control may have been exactly why Andrea kept him sidelined. To him, every sacrifice, every dollar spent, and every connection leveraged proved his worth. To Andrea and Taylor, it may have looked like chaos, overstepping, and constant pressure. This wasn't just parenting. This was power play. And this email shows how Taylor's rise wasn't built on luck, but on a tug-of-war between two parents who saw her career as their legacy. Scott Swift's email keeps piling on examples of just how much work he claimed to have done behind the scenes to build Taylor's career. He bragged, "Who pays for trips to New York? Dad. Who takes days off to make sure that whether it was Radio Disney, Britney's camp, or any event, we had CDs, frisbees, and headshots to give away? Dad. Who blew up 500 beach balls on the roof for Radio Disney? Dad." But his rant doesn't stop at hard work. It drips with bitterness. He complained about being excluded from glamorous moments, saying, "We are going to Britney's camp, but you and Austin can't come. Who gets to babysit Austin? Who funds the whole process but does not get to come to the dance? Dad." Over and over, his tone shifts from pride to resentment, creating the picture of a man desperate for recognition, yet painfully aware of being sidelined. And here's the contradiction. Scott clearly went above and beyond to push Taylor into stardom, but his delivery, condescending, almost self-pitying, makes his devotion sound unhinged. He constantly threw digs at Andrea, painting her as controlling, and bragged that ignoring her advice was the reason Taylor became a star. According to him, if he had sat back the way Andrea wanted, Taylor would have never made it. But here's the twist. Many reports and fan discussions claim the opposite. Andrea Swift was the one deeply involved in Taylor's day-to-day affairs, overseeing her career decisions, publicity, and carefully shaping her image. To some, Andrea was the stage mom who protected her daughter in a cutthroat industry. To others, she was overbearing and controlling. The leaked email flips that narrative, showing Scott insisting that he was the real engine, the one sweating behind the scenes while Andrea and Taylor took the spotlight. And this version is a far cry from the polished story Taylor shared with the public. The famous tale of her mom driving her to Music Row, waiting in the car with her brother, while Taylor went door to door with demo tapes saying, "Hi, I'm Taylor, I'm 11, I want a record deal." That sob story sells records, but Scott's version suggests it wasn't desperation or chance that opened doors. It was money, privilege, and strategic connections. And those connections? They were everywhere. Scott boasted about linking Taylor up with country legend Bill Anderson. He wrote, "I connect with Bill Anderson. Taylor does his fanfare show. Good move." Bill says, "This next girl has created the biggest buzz of anyone I've ever known. Get to know her name because you'll be hearing it for 25 years. And Bill wasn't exaggerating. Scott was relentless in reminding everyone that without his videotaping and networking, those moments wouldn't exist. He bragged, "If I do not videotape it, it does not happen." And then he added another startling admission. He had helped Bill years earlier, selling him a $10,000 dock in Pennsylvania for just $5,000, knowing that someday Bill could return. The favor. For Scott, it wasn't just about pushing Taylor. It was about leveraging every single connection he had built over decades. This paints a much darker reality. While fans clung to the image of Taylor as the small-town girl chasing big dreams, her father was working deals, pulling strings, and cutting checks to ensure she got every advantage possible. What looked like luck or talent to the outside world was, at least in part, calculated business strategy. And Scott wanted everyone to know it. Scott Swift's email closes with the same energy it began with: relentless, obsessive, and overflowing with receipts about how deeply he inserted himself into Taylor's career. He even wrote, "Thanked me over and over. Do I talk too much? Better believe it. And it's in your best interest. I don't quit." At one point, he even joked that he was this close to begging someone to let him manage their life because his system worked so well. And honestly, the way Scott operated explains a lot about the way Taylor herself strategizes today. One last example Scott gave Dan Dimtro. He insisted that Taylor's monumental Sony deal came directly from him. He bragged, "How did we get the Bluebird? I stayed in touch with Rob. They listened to the production, went to the website, and heard Taylor in person. We sat through a painful 3.5-hour writer's night. Andrea wanted to bolt, but I went over and pushed Rob. Those were the missing puzzle pieces." According to Scott, it was his persistence that transformed Taylor from just another girl with a guitar into an industry priority. And this is where the email turns almost shocking. Scott flat out admits that Taylor wasn't some overnight prodigy. She was meticulously propped up. He chased down every lead, spun every connection, and even orchestrated small publicity stunts, like calling up local reporters to cover Taylor's high school life. He told a journalist that his daughter was hanging out at Abercrombie & Fitch stores, pitching it as a way to attract young readers. Before long, a TV crew was at Taylor's school. Another buzzworthy moment, all thanks to Scott. But here's where things get messy. Enter Scott Borchetta. For Swifties, Borchetta's name is basically Voldemort. He's the Big Machine Records executive who later sold Taylor's masters to Scooter Braun, sparking one of the biggest scandals in music history. And yes, Scott Swift himself cashed out in that deal. Because not only did he fight to get Borchetta on Taylor's side in her early years, he also owned a 3% stake in Big Machine. When the company was sold, Scott walked away with millions. So let us be real. Are we really supposed to believe that Scott Swift, the man who micromanaged every tape, every contact, every duck drop event and beach ball stunt, somehow didn't he know what was in Taylor's contract? That he couldn't foresee what Borchetta was planning with Braun? Oh, please. This is the guy who bragged about forcing his financial clients to listen to Taylor's demos before reviewing their portfolios. He read every word and probably had a hand in writing half of them. Scott ended the email with his usual frustration. How do we find Scott Borchetta? Andrea told me not to send any more CDs to Frank Bell. Without Frank Bell, Borchetta doesn't know Taylor, and we don't know him. The end. And that's exactly what this 5-page rant proves. Nothing about Taylor Swift's career was luck or magic. It was calculation, privilege, money, and connections, all funneled through two overbearing parents determined to make her a star no matter the cost. Taylor's dad bragged about every move, resented his wife for stealing the spotlight, and positioned himself as the unsung architect of her entire career. So the next time you hear the story of the small-town girl from a Christmas tree farm who knocked on doors in Nashville with nothing but a dream, remember the ducks, the beach balls, the corporate contacts, the stockbroker dad and the 1%, and the contracts that eventually made him millions. What do you think? Was Taylor's rise just another Hollywood fairy tale spun to look humble, or was it the most carefully manufactured stardom we've ever seen? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives into celebrity scandals, and stay tuned, because in Hollywood, nothing is ever what it seems. Scott Swift's email eventually circles back to Frank Bell, rambling endlessly about how pivotal Frank was in Taylor's early career. He admitted that against Andrea's wishes, he went ahead and sent Taylor's CDs to Frank, and that one decision triggered a domino effect that changed everything. Scott described how Frank used Taylor's songs to hype up label promoters, playing them non-stop until people couldn't ignore her. He recounted that Frank was working on a music video project and hired Scott Borchetta's wife, Sandy, to do the styling. During filming, Taylor's music was played constantly, and Sandy became so intrigued that she went back to her husband and told him he had to hear this new girl. That's how Taylor got on Borchetta's radar. From there, Frank personally made sure Taylor's press kit was rerouted from Universal Studios to Scott Borchetta instead of Luke Lewis. Every move was intentional. This wasn't fate, it was calculated networking, persistence, and carefully timed strategy. Scott bragged that Borchetta was one of the two people he wished Taylor could work with. And in his eyes, this maneuver proved he was right all along. The email even includes Borchetta's own words of praise, where he supposedly told the Swifts that Taylor was the sound standard everyone wants, and that her success could shape his life as much as it shaped hers. Scott gloated about this validation, pointing out how the family's financial stability meant they never burdened Dan Dimtro or Borchetta with money issues. They had the luxury of dropping everything to focus on Taylor's dream. And that's where this unhinged 5-page letter becomes so revealing. It doesn't just show how Scott thought. It shows the environment Taylor grew up in, calculated, relentless, strategic. Every opportunity framed as a chess move. And when you look at Taylor's own career, from her Easter egg drops to her PR strategies, you can see exactly where she learned it. But here's the big question. What does Taylor think about this email leaking? The fact that mainstream outlets haven't covered it in detail speaks volumes about her PR team's power. They work overtime to keep the Swift family's calculated side hidden, pushing instead the narrative of Taylor as humble, relatable, and grounded. That's what sells. That's what made her America's sweetheart. Because let's be honest, stories about her parents pulling strings, throwing around money, and calculating every step don't fit the underdog image. It was never going to make headlines the same way her Christmas tree farm girl with a guitar story did. The reality is, Taylor's parents always set her up for success, whether it was going to be in entertainment, business, or something else entirely. They were both extremely strategic, right down to choosing her name. In a 2009 interview with Rolling Stone, Taylor herself admitted, "My mom thought it was cool that if you got a business card that said Taylor, you wouldn't know if it was a guy or a girl." Andrea believed an androgynous name could protect her daughter from discrimination in the corporate world. She literally named Taylor like she was prepping her for Wall Street. And that's the point. None of this makes Scott or Andrea villains, but it does make it clear that Taylor's image, her career, and even her name were calculated from the start. The Girl Next Door story was a brilliant marketing angle, but behind the curtain, her trajectory was carefully engineered. And if you thought the connections and contracts were shocking, just wait. Because next we're re-digging into one of the biggest myths of Taylor's early career, the guitar lessons story. the one her team pushed in 2009 about a magical twist of fate when she was 12. Spoiler, the truth is way more complicated. Taylor Swift has told the same story for years. When she was 12, a computer repairman came to fix the family computer, spotted her guitar in the corner, and magically taught her a few chords. A whimsical, humble origin story that fit perfectly with her small-town girl chasing big dreams image. But the truth? It's far less fairy tale. The so-called computer guy was actually Ronnie Kramer, a respected local musician. And Ronnie insists he wasn't just a passerby who strummed a few notes for Taylor. He says he was formally hired as her guitar teacher and worked with her for over a year and a half, 2 evenings a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at $30 an hour. Ronnie admits, yes, he does fix computers. That part is true. But he was approached by Andrea Swift, Taylor's mom, specifically to teach Taylor how to play country music. According to Ronnie, it started with guitar lessons but quickly evolved into something much deeper. He says, it went from teaching her chords to teaching her how to structure songs. Months went by before he ever touched their computer. So the idea that he was just some repairman passing through? Ronnie calls it a flat-out betrayal. In his own words, it was betrayal to have this story be that some repairman taught her a few chords, when in reality it was a year and a half every week, building her skills. To this day, he wishes Taylor would simply tell the truth. Ronnie also gave insight into just how controlling Andrea was during those early years. He says he tried to build a website for Taylor, but Andrea made the job impossible, constantly demanding he drop everything to prioritize her daughter. He described her as a bull in a china shop, adding that her intensity ultimately drove him to walk away. And the family dynamics weren't just tense with outsiders. Ronnie recalls Scott venting about his failing marriage, telling him, "I've got a wife that doesn't love me. I'm trying to help my daughter out, do all the right things, and my wife could care less." While messy, this matches the themes from Scott's infamous email: resentment, control struggles, and a fractured household behind the glossy image. But Ronnie dropped one more bombshell. He exposed the origins of the now infamous "you can to get Taco Bell" story. According to him, it was Taylor's younger brother Austin who first told him about it, describing how Andrea controlled even the smallest details of Taylor's life, including what she ate. The story was swept under the rug by Taylor's team for years. Then years later, Taylor slyly referenced it herself in her Miss Americana documentary while discussing her struggles with body image and pressure to stay thin. The pattern is impossible to ignore. Taylor has built an empire writing about betrayal, heartbreak, and truth-telling. Yet her own origin story was carefully manufactured, from the Christmas tree farm narrative to the magical guitar lessons myth. Behind every lyric of honesty, there's a layer of spin, strategy, and parental control shaping the image. And if Ronnie's account is true, it weighs not just Scott Way's obsessive networking that launched Taylor's career. Andrea's overbearing management played just as much of a role, even if it left wreckage in its path. Ronnie's most shocking revelation wasn't just about guitar lessons. It was about Taylor's relationship with her own mother. He recalled a moment when Taylor and her brother Austin both wanted Taco Bell. Andrea came back with fast food, but only for Austin. When Taylor asked why she didn't get any, Andrea allegedly told her, "Nobody wants to see a fat pop star." Taylor was handed a salad while her brother ate tacos. This story lines up with what Taylor herself admitted years later in her Miss Americana documentary. She revealed how she struggled with body image and developed unhealthy eating habits. At one point, she became so obsessive about staying thin that she dropped to a double zero. She admitted to tracking every calorie, over-exercising, and starving herself just to meet an image. Taylor confessed, "I wasn't eating during that time. It's not good for me to see pictures." And honestly, it's heartbreaking. Taylor wasn't just crushed by the weight of society's beauty standards. She was also under the pressure of her own parents. Andrea had her eye on the prize, but at what cost? Moving on to another carefully constructed myth, the famous Christmas tree farm childhood. Taylor has leaned on this story for years to make her upbringing sound modest and charming. But the reality is far more complicated. The family owned property in Shillington where they grew and sold Christmas trees, yes. But they also lived in a large, elegant home on Grandview Boulevard in Wyomissing, an upscale suburb just 7 miles away. Neighbors say it was often hard to figure out where the Swifts actually lived because they bounced between the homes. But one thing is clear. This was not a struggling farm girl story. This was the childhood of a wealthy family with money, property, and influence. And to make things even more telling, Taylor's early guitar lessons with Ronnie, and later another teacher named Joe, didn't even take place on the farm. They happened at the Grandview Boulevard house. The Christmas tree farm story wasn't fake, but it was polished into something simpler and sweeter to sell Taylor as a relatable small-town country girl. Behind the myth, the truth is stark. Taylor was a rich white girl, coached into playing country music with a fake accent to crack Nashville's market. Her dad, Scott, was the money man. Ronnie even joked that he could sell ice to Eskimos. Andrea, meanwhile, kept Taylor laser-focused, pushing her hard and micromanaging every detail. Together, they weren't just parents. They were managers, strategists, and image makers. And if that weren't enough, Taylor's parents also developed a reputation for cutting people off once they weren't useful anymore. Ronnie says he was bullied and pressured when he tried to tell the truth about teaching Taylor, even launching a website called I-to-ought-Taylor-Swift.com before the family shut him out completely. Then there's Andrew Orth, a photographer who once had a close relationship with the Swifts. His own mother used to babysit Taylor and Austin, and Taylor would tell Andrew that he was her favorite photographer. But once she got famous, Andrew says he disappeared from her world overnight. As she got bigger, I kind of vanished, he explained. It's a pattern that seems to repeat. Use people when they're needed, then cut them loose once the spotlight grows. So yeah, behind the polished fairy tales and the sweet country image, the reality is much harsher. Taylor's career was shaped by privilege, parental control, and a ruthless streak of calculated image-making that left broken ties in its wake. Reality hit photographer Andrew Orth in the most unexpected way, at a Denny A.S. in Tulsa back in 2007. On his way home from Los Angeles, he stopped in for food and was stunned to see every waitress and cook wearing the same Taylor Swift t-shirt. Printed across the front was one of his photographs. He hadn't been told, hadn't been compensated, nothing. Just another example of how people who helped Taylor early on were cut out once they weren't useful anymore. And that's the pattern, isn't it? Taylor's parents have long been presented in the media as these goofy, supportive mom and dad figures. But in reality, they were ruthless stage parents, obsessed with one thing and one thing only, making Taylor Swift a global superstar. Her success became their family identity, their legacy, their business. Andrea Swift was always front and center, at concerts, award shows, even Travis Kelce's football games. Wherever Taylor goes, her mother is right there, managing, overseeing, and controlling. Scott Swift, meanwhile, worked the numbers. Every record, every tour, every piece of merchandise, every cardigan sold, Scott was the one keeping the empire's books. Together, they weren't just parents. They were a management team, and Taylor was the product. Some insiders have even whispered that Taylor has no real autonomy from her parents. They insert their opinions into everything, 24/7, and it leaves fans wondering, sure, it worked, but at what cost? This is the same pop star who, for most of her career, avoided speaking up about politics or controversy because her father insisted she stay silent. When she finally wanted to use her voice, Scott tried to shut it down, telling her, "I've read the entire statement. I'm terrified. I'm the guy who went out and bought armored cars." Even Taylor's brother Austin is caught up in the machine. On the surface, he's an actor, but his main work is tied directly to Taylor's career, appearing in her music videos, producing them, and even managing aspects of her licensing business. Some fans have shown sympathy, saying it can't be easy to grow up in Taylor's shadow, ignored while his sister is worshipped worldwide. And then there's young Taylor herself. Some theorize that she didn't even recognize her parents and behavior as controlling or abusive because it was all she knew. She leaned on Andrea not just as a mother, but as her closest confidant, her best friend, her therapist, her shadow. What looked like loving support may have been a cycle of dependence that Taylor still hasn't broken free from. When you connect all the dots, Scott's obsessive behind-the-scenes maneuvers, Andrea's controlling presence, the myths about humble beginnings, the silent stories of those they cut out, a different image of Taylor Swift emerges. Not the underdog, not the wide-eyed girl from a Christmas tree farm, but the carefully manufactured product of two parents who treated her career like a corporate empire from the very start. The real question now is, does Taylor even know where their control ends and her independence begins? Or is her entire empire still being run on the same calculations and strategies her parents set in motion decades ago? What do you think? Was Taylor a victim of her parents' obsession, or has she carried on their same tactics to master the industry herself? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the secrets, scandals, and hidden truths behind Hollywood's biggest stars. Taylor has openly admitted in the past, "I've never been to therapy. I talk to my mom a lot because she's the one who has seen everything." On the surface, it sounds sweet, but when you look closer, it raises red flags. Andrea isn't just her mom, she's been Taylor's manager, her shadow, and in many ways, her therapist. Even in her 20s, Taylor had Andrea writing 13 on her hand before shows, clinging to it as a lucky charm. For some, that reads as endearing. For others, it's a sign of emotional stunting, a woman with little control over her own life, still deeply dependent on her mother. And this is why the psychology of Taylor Swift is such a fascinating rabbit hole. What happens to a person when their parents are both their caretakers and their career managers? When every move is calculated, every friend or collaborator scrutinized, and every public story manufactured? Taylor's immense success can't be denied, but her relationships, her need for control, and even her public feuds all tie back to those formative years under Andrea and Scott's thumb. This exposé is only the beginning. On Scandalous Media, we've covered Taylor plenty, but this is the first time we've gone into such detail about her parents and their behind-the-scenes influence. And trust me, there's more to come. We'll be doing a full deep dive into the psychology of Taylor Swift, exploring how her upbringing shaped not only her career, but her personality, her public battles, and the way she still navigates fame today. So don't miss it. Turn on post notifications, subscribe, and get ready for the most highly anticipated Taylor breakdown we've ever done. And now, I want to hear from you. What do you think of Taylor's relationship with her parents? Do you see Andrea as supportive or controlling? Was Scott the mastermind, or just bitter about being sidelined? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let me know if there's a specific feud, fallout, or rumor you want us to include in the psychology video. Make sure to follow us on social media and check out the podcast for even more deep dives. Once again, thank you for watching, and thank you to Solitaire Grand Harvest for sponsoring today's video. You can download it with the link below or scan the QR code on screen. This has been Scandalous Media, and remember, in Hollywood, nothing is ever as it seems. Until next time, stay tuned, because the truth always finds a way out.